The year before Cam Newton had the greatest college football season of all time, he was playing for a junior college in Brenham, Texas. The year before Cam Newton won NFL MVP, he had one of the worst seasons of his career. Cam Newton defied the odds every time he could, becoming one of the best quarterbacks to never win a Super Bowl. He became a pop culture icon and one of the faces of American sports. This is Cam Newton.
Let's bring in pressure this time. Newton nowhere to go, but he got away from Billy Wynn and got the first down with a leap over Darius.
One-on-one. Here is what I think he does best.
3rd and 7. Nate Ebner again in to bother Olsen off the line of scrimmage. Newton is chased. Got away from Ninkovich. Dancing. Gets away from Chandler Jones. Setting up space. There goes Cam. Add to the highlight reel that one. Newton to midfield.
That might be the greatest play I've seen Cam Newton make in a long time. This is the National Football League, and he makes 4 New England Patriots.
But before we get into the rest of the video, let's talk about today's sponsor, Factor. Want to budget this month by cutting back on takeout? Use Factor instead. Not only is Factor cheaper than takeout, but meals are ready faster than restaurant delivery in just 2 minutes. This June, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered right to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes, no prep, no mess. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals offer so many nutritious options for keeping my fridge well stocked, like smoothies and juices, perfect for easy snacking. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code DJMP450 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Again, that's factor75.com or click the link below and use code DJMP450 to get 50% off your first Factor box. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring this video. Cam Newton was born and raised in Georgia to his parents Cecil and Jackie Newton. Newton played at Westlake High School in Atlanta and eventually drew the attention of the University of Florida. After committing, Cam Newton sat behind Tim Tebow as a freshman, where he would play marginally and show some minor flashes. All in all, there wasn't too much going for him. He was the backup quarterback of a very good team and not too much more. And in his sophomore season, things wouldn't really go his way. In the season opener against Hawaii, he injured his ankle, so he would take another medical redshirt season. And in November of 2008, things would get worse for Cam Newton. He was found to have stolen a laptop from another student at the University of Florida. Newton threw the computer out of his dorm window when police were investigating. Newton was then suspended indefinitely from all team activities and made the decision to transfer away from the University of Florida. In January, he reached a decision. He would go to Blinn College in Brenham, Texas, about an hour away from Houston. It was a fall from grace and wake-up call for Cam Newton. After being on an SEC program, he now had to climb his way back into Division I college football. And that's exactly what he did. In 12 games at Blinn, Cam Newton finished with 22 passing touchdowns and 16 rushing touchdowns. He had almost 700 rushing yards and almost 3,000 passing yards. He led Blinn to a junior college national championship. This, in turn, would make him a top transfer recruit. While Mississippi State was interested, it would be Auburn that gets the commitment of Cam Newton. The Tigers would be ranked 22nd in the AP preseason poll for the 2010 season. Looking at the Auburn roster, it's easy to see why. There simply wasn't much talent offensively outside of Newton, and on defense, there were 2 main pieces, Dee Ford and Nick Fairley. But still, this team didn't stack up from a talent perspective compared to the Alabamas of the world. Auburn's first game was against Arkansas State, who they would beat handily, 52-26, but Cam Newton especially shined. He had 5 total touchdowns and over 170 rushing yards, but still, Arkansas State wasn't that impressive of a team. The following 2 weeks, Auburn beat Mississippi State and Clemson, beating them by a combined 6 points. They were both close games, but Cam Newton was still establishing himself as a quarterback in the SEC. The next week, something special would happen. In a game against 12th ranked South Carolina, Auburn found themselves in a 12-7 deficit early on. With about 50 seconds left in the second quarter, Cam Newton was able to run one in to bring the lead to only 6 points. And then he'd do it again. And then he'd score 2 more touchdowns, this time through the air. Cam Newton would finish the game with 5 total touchdowns and almost 400 total yards. Auburn had just beaten a top 12 team in the country, and they were still rising. 2 weeks later, 7th ranked Auburn would play against 12th ranked Arkansas. Auburn would once again win, this time scoring nearly 70 points, again led by Cam Newton. The next week, Auburn would beat 6th ranked LSU. Auburn then got 3 more easy wins against Ole Miss, Chattanooga, and Georgia before they would play Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Alabama, of course, is Auburn's biggest rival, and they were a top 10 ranked team in this game. So the stage was set for a big matchup. And early on, things were not going Auburn's way. Midway through the second quarter, they were already down 24 points. The run game is really what won Auburn a lot of their games early on, but Alabama was stuffing them easily. Cam Newton would only finish with 40 total rushing yards, which was an anomaly for that 2010 season. But midway through that second quarter, Cam Newton would start to show off his arm talent. He threw about a 40-yard touchdown to Emory Blake at the end of the second quarter. And then he threw a 70-yard touchdown pass to Terrell Zachary to open the third quarter. Just like that, Auburn was only down 10 points. And 10 minutes later, Cam Newton would run in a 1-yard touchdown. At the start of the fourth quarter, Auburn trailed by 6 points. But again, that wouldn't last. With 12 minutes left in the game, Cam Newton threw a touchdown pass, this time 7 yards out. And Auburn wouldn't surrender the lead for the rest of the game. The Tigers had survived the Iron Bowl, but there was still one more obstacle before the NCAA BCS National Championship. South Carolina would get their shot at a rematch with Auburn in the SEC Championship. But it wouldn't really even be a game. Auburn would win handily, in part because Cam Newton again scored 6 total touchdowns. Finally, all that stood between Cam Newton and a national championship was 2nd-ranked Oregon, who was also undefeated. It would be a back-and-forth game. Auburn would score, Oregon would score, Auburn would score again, and on the last play of the game, as time expired, kicker Wes Byram would hit a 19-yard field goal to win after Cam Newton brought his team down to score. Cam Newton would finish the season with 50 total touchdowns, almost 3,000 yards passing, and 1,500 yards running the ball. In just one season as a starter for an SEC school, he'd accomplished everything that he needed and more, winning a Heisman Trophy. But he would soon turn his eyes to the NFL. Cam Newton had one of the greatest single seasons of college football of all time, if not the best. So what if I told you that there was still some hesitancy for Cam Newton to be the first overall selection in the 2011 NFL Draft? Because there was. The Carolina Panthers, who held the first overall pick, needed a franchise quarterback, and there were more than capable options in the draft, according to experts. If you looked up NFL mock draft from 2011, you'd actually be pretty surprised by the amount of them that don't have Cam Newton at number 1. You'd see names like Nick Fairley, Blaine Gabbert, Von Miller, all sorts of different kinds of players. But the Panthers would have fallen in love with the athleticism, strong arm, and college production that Cam Newton provided. After all, he did just win a national championship, and let's face it, he did it on an Auburn offense that didn't have all that much talent. Looking back, it's kind of weird to see how a 6'5" freak athlete was viewed as he was in that particular draft class. But the Carolina Panthers would come to their decision. In his first game in a Carolina Panthers uniform, despite a loss to the Arizona Cardinals, Cam Newton would put the league on alert. On 37 total pass attempts, Cam Newton would score 3 total touchdowns and have 422 yards, and he was just getting started. Week 2 against the Packers, Newton had 430 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was electrifying, revolutionizing how the quarterback position could be played. With the threat of his legs and the threat of his arm, there wasn't really a quarterback like that when Cam Newton entered the league. In Week 12 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Cam Newton set a record. He had scored the most rushing touchdowns by any non-running back in NFL history. And there were still 4 weeks left to go. And after a disappointing 6-10 season from the Carolina Panthers, Cam Newton was still on the rise. He would win the NFL's Offensive Rookie of the Year award. But again, he was just getting started. The following year, Newton would improve marginally, as would the Panthers. But in 2013, he had a career season, even better than his rookie year. He finished the season with 30 total touchdowns and 13 interceptions, leading the Panthers to a 12-4 record and a divisional round bye week. This was after the Panthers started with a 1-3 record, so finishing 12-4 was pretty special. Unfortunately, the team and Cam Newton would struggle in that divisional round game against the 49ers. Newton finished 16 of 25 throwing the ball with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. And those struggles would largely continue into the following season. He went 5-8-1 as the Carolina Panthers starter in 2014, but the Panthers still did make the playoffs due to a weak NFC South, and they even won a playoff game against a Cardinals team that had their third-string quarterback playing. That game was even dubbed the worst playoff game of all time by SB Nation, or Secret Base now, I should say. But after that, Carolina would be outmatched by a great Seahawks team who would win that game 31-17. The Panthers were again disappointed in the divisional round of the playoffs, but nobody could have predicted what was next.
Newton steps up, throws for the end zone. Olsen, touchdown!
Back spot up top for Olsen. Run it down, touchdown, Carolina. 2nd and 9. Newton, end zone, touchdown.
In those tight windows, that ball has some cheese on it. Cam Newton firing, and these Carolina Panthers receiving targets have learned how to catch.
MVP, Most Valuable Player. Cam Newton should never have been in this spot. He was suspended from the Florida college football program. He had to claw his way back to the SEC after playing a year in JUCO. He had to adapt his game to the NFL. But Cam Newton has arrived. 45 total touchdowns and 10 interceptions, with nearly 4,000 passing yards and over 600 rushing yards. The Carolina Panthers didn't lose in the first 14 weeks of the 2015 season, and when they did, it didn't matter. They were too good. The Panthers finished as the first seed in the NFC and cruised through the playoffs. They went on to face the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl. Atop every mountain is a descent that players must face. For Cam Newton, his descent would start with Super Bowl 50. The Panthers lost in what should be described as an uncompetitive game. They would be seen as one of the best teams to never win a Super Bowl. 15 wins and an NFL MVP award, but there was no ring to show for it. So how much did it really matter? And in the following season, the Panthers would face what many describe as a Super Bowl hangover. The team looked bad. Cam Newton went 6-8 in games that he played in. The Panthers would finish with a top 10 draft pick just a year after winning the NFC, a year after having 15 wins, and a year after Cam Newton had won an NFL MVP award. That was a massive fall from grace. But the following year, 2017, the Panthers would pick it back up. The team went 11-5 in 2017, and it was one of the best seasons of Cam Newton's career. He would have particularly good games against New England, Minnesota, and Green Bay, but everything would lead into the wild card game against the New Orleans Saints, a team that had beaten the Panthers twice in the regular season. And Cam Newton would show out. He finished with 350 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, but unfortunately, the Panthers still didn't have enough to get past the Saints, so yet another season was over early in the playoffs. But in 2018, Cam Newton looked like his MVP self. Through the first 8 weeks of the season, he had accrued 19 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, with over 2,000 total yards. The Panthers were 6-2 going into a Thursday night game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's when, well, this happened.
A real big rush just yet. Newton gets hit. Ball is out. McCaffrey able to get back on top of it. Well, TJ Watt, he's not even blocked.
After this hit and after this game, the Panthers nor Cam Newton would be the same. The team lost 7 of its last 8 games, and Cam Newton underperformed to a major degree. After being top 10 in MVP odds for the first half of the season, that was now over, as were the Carolina Panthers' playoff hopes. The following year, Cam Newton only played 2 games. He just wasn't right. And the Panthers were now due for some changes after 2 disappointing seasons and a playoff loss coming the year before that. So the Panthers made the decision under new head coach Matt Rule to waive Cam Newton. His time in Carolina was done. Cam Newton would spend a year in New England and then re-sign in Carolina for a short time, but since then, he really hasn't had a role in the NFL, which is a shame because he was one of the most talented players to ever touch an NFL football. In fact, I'd go as far to say as he is the most talented player to never win a Super Bowl. He came close, he won an MVP, his team went 15-1, but he could never reach the ultimate prize. He had one of the greatest college football seasons of all time, if not the greatest. He revolutionized how the quarterback position could be played. But at the end of the day, how much does it matter if you don't win a Super Bowl? The story of Cam Newton is one that shows that no 2 players are the same. His story is one of triumph and tragedy at the same time. Cam Newton brought his personality wherever he played. That's what made him so great. That's why there will never be another Cam Newton. Hey everybody, I appreciate you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment who you would like to have a video of next. I also started a new podcast, the DJ MP3 podcast, so check that out if you want. I mainly talk about basketball, football over there. So yeah, peace.